Now, I've always made my opinions on sequels quite clear. If it doesn't add something new to the story or improve on something that was lacking, then it was completely unnecessary, in my opinion anyway. That's just my 2 cents, yet the sequels keep pouring in. There are, however, movies out there that left room for a sequel and never got one, or movies that might be in dire need of a follow-up. These are the top 5 horror movie sequels that never happened. Let's jump in. Also, I have read your comments and I apologize that I'm ever so slightly looking off screen. We of course aren't in the studio because of the stay-at-home order in Toronto, and I don't have the equipment that we have at the studio. But I'm doing my best, so I'm sorry. Get me in at number 5, It Follows. Look, I can only apologize, truly. I know you folks aren't the biggest fans of It Follows, but it's also not my fault that it fits into many different categories, such as this one. Released in 2014 and directed by David Robert Mitchell, It Follows tells the story of Jay, a 19-year-old college student who becomes tormented and pursued by a supernatural entity after sleeping with a guy she went on a date with. Now, the entity is ruthless and persistent, taking on the form of any person, a stranger or a friend, and simply following Jay until it catches her and kills her. There is a way to stop the torment though, and that is by sleeping with someone else and passing along the entity to another person. However, the catch is, if the entity kills the person you gave it to, it will revert back to you. Now, It Follows is perhaps one of the most unique and creative horrors in recent years, with it being intense and almost an homage to the classic slashers of the 70s and 80s. The killer isn't seen often, but they are always there, and you know they will eventually find you and catch you. Now, the ending of the movie did leave open the potential for a sequel, with it potentially following a brand new set of people, or even going back in time and delivering the origin of the entity. Where did it come from? How did it start? However, it seems like David Robert Mitchell has absolutely no interest in making a follow-up to this movie, and that is completely understandable. Why ruin a good thing? Coming in at number 4, The Last House on the Left. Now, part of me is so happy that The Last House on the Left never got a sequel because of how difficult it was to get through the movie to begin with. Released in 1972 and directed by Wes Craven, The Last House on the Left follows 2 teenagers who are kidnapped and taken into the woods and subsequently tortured and killed by a gang of murderous thugs. The gang then attempt to seek shelter in a nearby home, only to discover that the home belongs to the parents of one of the teenagers. And of course, from that point on, things descend into bloody mayhem. The movie is incredibly violent, upsetting, and tough to get through in parts, specifically the moments in the woods. And Craven certainly didn't feel the need to give us any kind of Hollywood ending, unlike the remake of the movie, which allowed for one of the teens to survive. Now, what made The Last House on the Left so effective is the simple fact that it was so of its era. During this time, people were still reeling from the Manson family murders, and elements of that definitely seeped into the movie. So a sequel now would perhaps be less effective, not to mention the movie ends with the gang getting murdered by teen parents, so where the story would go from there is unknown. According to some reports, Wes Craven considered a sequel and having 2 of the killers coming back from hell to kill again. But thankfully that idea was nixed, and probably for the best. It's a truly terrible idea. I think it's best to leave this movie as a standalone, and giving it a new life would be completely unnecessary. Coming in at number 3, we have The Skeleton Key. The Skeleton Key is a movie I truly believe we are all sleeping on. I remember watching this when I was younger and being absolutely terrified. I think it's about time we revisit it. Released in 2005 and directed by Ian Softly, The Skeleton Key stars Kate Hudson, Gina Rowlands, John Hurt, and Peter Sarsgaard, with it following a New Orleans hospice nurse who begins a job at Terrebonne Parish Plantation home. However, she quickly becomes entangled in a supernatural mystery involving the old home, its former residents, and the rituals that took place there. Over the course of the movie, we begin to learn that some of the past residents may still be in the home, just not in the form we expect. Now, this era certainly wasn't the greatest for horror movies. However, The Skeleton Key felt like a breath of fresh air, with us finally seeing Kate Hudson in a good movie after a series of terrible rom-coms. Now, critics were harsh with this movie, claiming it was uninteresting, a slow burn with unpleasant characters. However, I couldn't disagree more. With actors like John Hurt Gene and Roland's making reading the phone book sound interesting. The movie is by no means a masterpiece in horror cinema, but it is truly quite terrifying, with a unique plot and superb actors to back it all up. It also went on to make around $94 million at the box office. Surprisingly, the movie didn't have a sequel, with its ending definitely leaving room for a follow-up. After all these years, it's probably doubtful that we will ever get a sequel, but a girl can dream. Coming in at number 2, we have The Crazies. The Crazies is a truly great horror movie that I don't think enough of us talk about. Let's change that. Released in 2010 and directed by Brett Eisner, The Crazies is a remake of the 1973 film of the same name. It stars Timothy Olyphant, Radha Mitchell, Joe Anderson, and Danielle Panabaker, with it being set in a fictional Iowa town that becomes afflicted by a biological agent that turns those infected into violent killers. Now, as the illness begins to spread around the town, a group of survivors attempt to escape, while the military take extreme measures to contain the issue. The movie is incredibly tense, leaving you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. Not to mention, the makeup in this movie is incredible, adding even more horror to this already horrifying movie. It's gory yet simple. The Crazies manages to be an effective horror movie without overcomplicating the narrative. Now, this movie was a hit among horror movie lovers and critics alike, with it being described as tense, nicely shot, and uncommonly intelligent, which is incredibly kind considering horror movies these days are often ripped apart at the seams. In my opinion, we're all sleeping on The Crazies, with it clearly being one of the most underrated horror movies of the 2010s. One that we need to all go revisit and give it the credit it deserves. The ending also set up the possibility of a sequel, but sadly nothing has come of it. Maybe one day, but I'd suggest not holding your breath. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have The Cabin in the Woods. Now, this is a movie that will have many screaming at me for including, but I have my points and you'll understand very soon where I'm coming from. Released in 2011 and directed by Drew Goddard, The Cabin in the Woods stars Kristen Connolly, Chris Hemsworth, Anna Hutchison, Franz Kranz, and Jesse Williams, with it telling the story of a group of college friends who go away to a remote cabin in the woods for a peaceful weekend. However, things descend into madness for the group when backwoods zombies attack. Now, of course, it is revealed pretty early on that the monsters aren't attacking on their own accord. It is instead all orchestrated by an underground organization who sacrifice many all over the world to appease the gods living beneath the earth. If they're not fed, they will rise up and destroy the world. Now, the movie isn't subtle in the slightest, and instead is very self-aware and satirical, while also being an effective slasher. Now, it should be said, if you've seen the movie you'll know, that it would be incredibly challenging to make a sequel, considering how the movie ended. But there could be potential prequel talks, with us following another group who face off against the organization, or perhaps we watch on as the gods rise up in the sequel. There are options, just challenging options, and director Drew Goddard has stated, I quote, "I don't need to just go make a sequel for the sake of making a sequel." And honestly, I agree. I don't think The Cabin in the Woods needs to be touched, and anything else would simply undercut the truly effective and perfectly fitting ending. Best to leave it alone, in my opinion anyway. Well, there we have it. Do you guys agree with our list? Were there any horror movies that we missed? Leave us all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below, and perhaps we can do a part 2. Before I go though, I just want to respond to a few comments from one of our last videos. Top 5 horror movie villains you didn't see coming. Caitlin Veneer said, "I can't believe Lucy didn't like The Boy. I really enjoyed it." Well, Caitlin, I'm sorry, we can't all agree on all movies. Some people like certain things, other people don't. I didn't like The Boy. And that's the end of that. Brian said, "Yesterday upon the stair I met a man who wasn't there. He wasn't there again today. I wish he'd go away. Such a chilling part of Identity." Yeah, very chilling. Also reminds me of the movie The Haunting in Connecticut. That just sends shivers down my spine. It makes me think of Paranormal Activity. Casey Orlando said, "Not going to lie, the turkey-based part almost made me throw up." Yep, they're talking about Don't Breathe. Yep, if you've seen it, you'll understand. There's a part with the turkey baster and it's very, very disgusting. It makes me feel sick. Ashley Loves to Save said, "I think the movie you were talking about at the end is The Platform." That is correct. I was talking about that movie that came to Netflix, everyone was talking about for a period of time, and then we all realized it was actually very everyone hyped it up. Somewhere, I heard about it on TikTok first. I can't remember from what country it came. I think it was France, or it may have been Quebecois. I think that's how you say it, Quebecois. Or Spanish. I can't remember what it is. But it had a really great concept, and the ending was horrible. So, I don't know. Jim Fleming said, "Have you ever seen any of the Sonny and Cher shows? Take a gander, but not from the Gander Bay." Look, I have seen all of Sonny and Cher. Any Cher video that there is to watch, I've watched it. Trust me. Space Cryptid said, "Your ponytails keep changing. I suspect witchcraft." They only keep changing depending on if I've brushed my hair that day. So like today I've curled my hair. There are some days that I just wake up and toss it in a ponytail, which is why it looks different. And on that note, if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, and until next time, I'll see you later. I'm so annoyed my mic was off. It keeps happening. This happened like 3 videos in a row. I think it's a mic problem. It is pretty anyway.